Welcome to Girl Call Me with Tanya,
And Jessica,
the podcast where Black women's voices shine.
come for the empowerment and storytelling and stay for the sisterhood.
Girl Call Me with Tanya and Jessica's new episodes every Wednesday, everywhere you get podcasts.
Head over to girlcallme.com to find out all the ways we can continue the conversation together.
Hey, welcome to Girl Call Me. You know, it's going to be when this episode releases, it's actually going to be the best day of the year. Do you know what day that is, Jessica?
I don't. I think I'm drawing a blank.
Oh,
I know. It's the first day of the cusp of Virgos.
oh, heck no. No. Listen, we don't start talking about Virgos until the end of next week, but no, let's be clear. The most important day of the year is coming up and it's next Wednesday. So when you guys are listening, just please, put a little, on our Instagram or on Facebook, put a little message for me because guess what? It's my birthday. So welcome to
Asking people for birthday wishes, asking people proactively for birthday wishes is wild.
I actively ask people for birthday gifts. I send them a list. So this would really go, this is on brand, as you would say. So anyway, welcome everyone to another episode of Girl Call Me. Jessica, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Just relaxing. Spent a lot of time, worked, what is it? Worked very hard. I don't know the saying I was going to go with.
Work
Worked
hard,
very
play
hard this
hard.
week. Play hard. That's right.
Yes, working
Um,
hard, playing hard.
I've been working hard and playing hard. Back in the vineyard.
Don't be mad. I'm mad right now. So because I'm not joining her this time.
Why somehow am I waking up to like text messages from Tanya giving me updates of what's happening in the vineyard? Meanwhile, I'm the one here.
Because you need to be in the know. There's a lot of exciting things.
She's like, and we're talking about like, hey, why does this store have a line outside right now? I'm like, girl, how would I know the answer to this?
To me, I was like, because it never has a line outside of it. So I'm not gonna, it's my favorite store, but I won't talk about it. It's in Oak Bluff, C'est La Vie. Anyway, I think I just said it. C'est La Vie. I love C'est La
I
Vie.
would say that if you're following the store foot traffic of a store when
I,
you're not near it,
I'm so
you
sorry.
definitely are a super fan.
I'm definitely a super fan. No, I'm just envious. I'm just envious. It's funny. I was just thinking about it. I was kind of traveling, going to do some errands, and I just realized as I was driving by a college that this is actually just an important weekend. A lot of kids are going back to school
Mhm.
on Monday. A
Yes.
lot of students are going back to classes. It is welcome week for many campuses around the country. So, want to give a big hug, a virtual hug to all the parents who are super excited that they are getting their kids out of the house.
Right. I thought you were gonna, yeah, I thought you were gonna say a big hug to all the incoming freshmen. I was like, okay, auntie, like,
No, I'm not. I'm not hugging them because I know they're about to protest in three, two, one. I'm
right.
sure there's
And
something.
they're in the first weeks of school, they're all about to have a communicable disease by Friday.
Ooh, well, yeah. Let's not put that on them. Let's hope that they have a great. If they're a freshman, they're having a great first couple weeks. They're
Oh, memorable
excited.
time. Very
Yeah. So,
memorable time.
and if they're a senior, they're just excited that it's almost the clock starts ticking. And if you're an
Right.
administrator, like some of my friends, or a faculty member, blessings, just blessings.
Blessings. Um,
But
s-
mhm,
yeah, you know what? So we've talked about, I think, over a few episodes and certainly our preventative care episodes. I wanted, I know you and I had talked about kind of in jest, we talk about all the like stuff that goes wrong with us sometimes and the
yeah,
doctors that we see. And this episode, you and I had a conversation at some point just about what are all the things that all of us go through that we don't share with each other. We wait way too long and then
yeah,
we find out, oh, yeah, this is something that can be helped and something can, someone can help you with this. And oh, by the way, you're not the only one experiencing this. And I think for a lot of us, especially in the Black community, fibroids is one of those things. Wouldn't you
Absolutely.
agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the stats are crazy, but I don't know any Black woman currently that has not or is not struggling at some point in their young life with fibroids. It's there's some we're going to be bringing some experts in the next couple weeks to have conversations about this. I know that sometimes it's serious because fibroids affects your life in so many ways, whether it's pain management, whether it's just general social interactions because of embarrassment and other things. And now there's a new research that came out and we'll share it that you could be misdiagnosed, particularly as if you're a Black woman, you can think it's fibroids, but it might be cancer. So
Right.
it's so much
Yeah.
something that we need to have conversations about.
Yeah. I think, the experience that we all go through, I mean, this is, let's like be real about it. We don't often talk to other women about how we bleed. Like,
No,
even though it's something that that most everyone who's menstruating is doing for 3 to 7 days of your month. So, like, nearly 10% of the month it's happening, but no one actually talks about
right.
it and
And
talks
half of
about,
your life. And half
right.
of your life.
Right, and no one's talking about what does it look like, what does it feel like for you. I saw a post today that just said ibuprofen is basically just women's preventative care, right? And it was talking about,
That's so sad.
um, that Olympian, I forget her name, the rugby player, she was going to get her IUD put in,
Mm.
and she's like, basically, the prep for the surgery is ibuprofen.
Mm.
And then I go in and I'm experiencing like what would, if I was a male, be probably a overnight hospital stay that was paid for by insurance. And that's kind of, I think, what we deal with as women a lot. And so anyway, we knew that this is a conversation that a lot of people don't talk about. And so we wanted to have some dialogues leading up to an expert for people to share their experiences with fibroids, with any type of reproductive health conversation, and just hear people's perspectives. So you also, just for awareness, and that if it's something you're going through, you don't feel alone, and you also know what were signs that maybe are more than, I'll just handle this with an ibuprofen and, an ice pack or a warm heating pad.
Yeah, it's interesting. 61% of women are not even aware of treatment options for fibroids. And
Yeah.
I was one of them. I mean, I think I
Yeah.
still am one of them. I will be honest. I just got uterine ultrasound about a week and a half ago because yearly I get them and they're not getting smaller, they're getting larger. So trying to make some decisions. And so I think that what I appreciate is the experts we're going to be having conversations with in the coming weeks. And I also appreciate our very special guest who is someone close to you. And I don't know if you want to go ahead and introduce Sarah.
Oh, sure. Well,
Mhm.
we have a special guest who's my sister, older, wiser, smarter. We'll stop there. No more, and no more
I mean,
adjectives.
yeah, I think I can't top that, so I'll have you stop there.
My sister's here to join us. Why I thought it would be fun is because so much of what we talk about is kind of your girlfriends in your life and
Yeah.
different experiences, and my sister and I are 3.5 years apart, and so a lot of what we've gone through in life is similar and together. And I think especially as we've gotten older, or more mature, I'd say, not older, as we've aged well, our experiences are more and more similar and more close together. So thought it would be good to have her. And I know we've been getting lots of people asking us to talk about women's health and reproductive health in particular. And I know that Sarah has a good story to share. So welcome,
Yeah.
Sarah. And,
Thank you.
yes, girl, call us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for, yeah. Maybe you could share a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so as Jess said, I am her older sister, just under 4 years older. And my fibroid journey began in about 2019, just before the old pandemic hit us. But
Right.
yeah, that complicated my journey a lot. But I had an IUD inserted in 2016. And I had
Just
already,
had it
Wait.
the timing of the IUD was why
oh, it
again?
was motivated by the election when the 45th president was elected, and one of his promises was he wanted to repeal the reproductive health coverage in the Affordable
Woo!
Care Act.
Here we
So
are, 2024. Feels a little,
I
wow.
know.
Yeah,
I know.
very.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I am definitely using that benefit. So I got an IUD right before at the end of 2016, and it was great. It as advertised, did everything that it was supposed to. I was feeling light and easy breezy, like
Oh,
everything was
okay.
great. Yeah, I would have
Right.
done an ad for Morena. Like this is
It sounds
perfect.
like it. Well,
Yeah.
question, Sarah, as you unpack it, what were the other options that you were given when you had a conversation with your gynecologist or your OB? What was some of the options you were given besides the IUD, and why did you decide on that?
She went through all of the different ones, the copper, the hormonal, the depo provera. I had been taking birth control pills for years, but kind of off and on, and so she did kind of go through all the options for me. And the Mirena IUD seemed the best. It had the least kind of side effects that people have had or whatever, and the time that it lasted seemed really good. Like she was like, you're easily 5 years, you can push it longer, but it depends. So I was like, okay, sign me up. Great. So it worked perfectly. Everything was very regular. I had always had really heavy and long periods,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, since the beginning. So it was kind of like, okay, I'm used to this. But then all of a sudden with the IUD, we're like 3 days in and out. Like everything was great for about 2.5 years. Then
Okay. That's a good
all
run, maybe. A good run, maybe.
exactly. So yeah, I'd gotten into it, but then all of a sudden it was like a switch. And it just suddenly now I'm going back to like 5, 6 days, really heavy. I'm having cramping. So I kind of did research and I was like, well, she said this should last like 5 years. So
Right.
I go back to the doctor. I kind of tell her what's going on. And she does an exam and she's like, it looks like the IUD has been kind of pushed out of position. And I was like, okay, because I had checked myself before and it was still there. You can check to be sure it's still in place. And so I checked and I knew it was still there. And so when she saw that it had gotten pushed out of position, she said, oh, you have a fibroid. And the
Mm.
fibroid had pushed the IUD out of position, so it wasn't working anymore. I remember when she told me this, and I was kind of like, oh, wow. And she said, have you ever had any fibroids before? And I'd
Right.
only been seeing this gynecologist for a couple years. And I said, no. And she kind of said, well, given your age, that at that time I was, almost 40. Yeah, I was like 39. So she's like, given your age, given that you are a Black woman, and she said this in more of a kind of softer way, but I'll just use the normal, given that you are a plus size woman, given that you have never been pregnant, she said, with all of those statistics, the fact
She's
that
like,
this is the
"Yahtzee."
first time,
You're like,
yeah.
thanks. Thanks,
Well, she
check,
said,
check.
yeah, given that you have never had any fibroids before and you've gotten this far, she's like, I am kind of surprised. And so I was kind of like,
Okay.
okay.
Okay. Yeah, quick question. So it's interesting because it's not, I've had fibroids throughout my heavy periods, fibroids and doctors. And every year, because of those fibroids, I have had to have a pelvic ultrasound. It has
Hmm.
just been part of my routine. And they've gone, oh, you have this. And now I think I have about 10. And they always say, once you get to perimenopause and menopause, they'll start to shrink. So thinking about you and that one fibroid and the IUD. Had they done a pelvic ultrasound or figure out why you had heavy bleeding prior to that?
No, I had never, before that, I had never had a pelvic ultrasound. I had never had anything more than just kind of your basic pap smear
Yeah.
and, basic hand exam. I'm sure there's a more formal term than hand exam.
Everyone, every man is now turned off.
I know.
They're like no
But
Hand
longer
no,
exam.
listening. No longer
yeah,
listening.
no, I had never had anything more than that, but also I had never gone to the doctor for that issue because, like so many things we hear in women's health, I just put up with it because I thought, well, this must be how it is for everyone. Like
Right.
everyone has a heavy period. Like, I'm sure it's fine. And
And
so then when
they hate to prescribe a transvaginal ultrasound or a pelvic ultrasound. I don't know if it's the cost or like what, like they won't do it like ever. You have to
You know,
like
it's really
correct
interesting.
them.
I have never had a doctor not tell
Huh.
me that when they're like, "Oh, you have fibroids? Let's do that." I mean,
Oh yeah,
I've
if
gone to
you have
several
fibroids. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe if
I
you
mean,
have it already.
yeah, I actually would argue that it should be part of a regular Real Woman
Yes.
Yearly because
Mhm.
that pelvic ultrasound is able to pick up stuff that
Yeah,
the hand, as you described it, is unable to pick
yeah,
up.
for
You
Yeah.
know,
sure.
so here you are, you have the IUD, you thought that was going to help with the heavy bleeding and some of the stuff that you have. Now they've told you you have a fibroid.
Yeah.
What did they do next?
So, because of the location, the fibroid that I had was inside the uterus. So, the first step was she tried kind of an intermediate procedure where she could go in and kind of like grind or like shave it down in size because a lot of the other treatments that they use would not work for a fibroid inside the uterus because
Oh,
basically the idea is it like some of the treatments were like they cut off the blood supply to the fibroid
yeah,
or they do that because of where it is, it would then be just kind of like dead tissue inside, which is not safe either.
no.
So she tried this intermediate one, and I went a couple months, went back to check, it had grown back. And because of my age too, because at that point, I'm 38, 39, my doctor had some realistic conversations with me about what my own plans for childbearing were. Because if I had been really trying to conserve my fertility, that would have kind of put her in one lane because a lot of the treatments could put fertility in jeopardy.
Right.
So she did have really kind of frank conversations with me. And I think I relieved her when I let her know that at that point, I had pretty much already made my decision that I was not seeking to bear a child. And so then that really opened up the different things that she could do since we weren't worried about conserving my ability to get pregnant later on. So I had my last appointment, and my birthday's in January. So I remember this because I had gone right before my birthday in about December 2019. And at that point,
Nice.
yeah. So
Okay.
the intermediate things didn't really work. And we had conversations, and she said, if you are open to it, she's like, I think the best option is to remove your uterus
Oh,
because at this point, it had grown. And she said, I don't think we should try around with any of these intermediate things anymore. And if you're willing. And I said, I think that's what I want to do. And she said, you know what, take a couple months just to think about it. Let's make an appointment for April of 2020.
oh, here we go.
So that's what we did. And then obviously that appointment I did not keep. But what has happened is almost about that time, like late March, early April 2020, I suddenly experienced a lot of bleeding. Like I started bleeding a lot. And so I couldn't get a hold of my gynecologist. Like you were unable to reach
Right.
her. So I had like a tele visit with another doctor who I've never met. And, I'm kind of worried. And I remember this as I kind of described my situation. And, I said, my doctor and I were planning to have a hysterectomy. Is it possible? And they said, at this point, it'll be at least 6 or 7 months before we could even see you. And I just started crying on the phone because I was just like, and the doctor said too, because that's considered an elective procedure because I'm choosing just for fun to
Right,
do
you're
that.
choosing the blade and you're choosing so my question, they never solved the IUD. So the IUD was
No,
still
so they took it. So the first time she took it out, she tried kind of shaving
fixing
down
it. Okay.
and
Right.
then putting a new one back in to see. And then it did the same thing. It just pushed it out. And then she was like, okay, we're done with this IUD. So that part was done. So they tell me 6 to 7 months. I'm just like,
I was just thinking,
great.
like, she was done on January 6th. It was, like, perfect timing.
It was close. We were close to
Yeah,
that date,
yeah.
actually. Yeah. So I'm like beside myself. And so they prescribed me over the phone oral contraceptives. And they're like, maybe
Okay.
this will help. So they give me the oral
Okay.
contraceptives and has no difference. So I'm kind of continuing on. The bleeding gets even worse to the point where I become anemic because I was to
Because
the
you're
point.
bleeding, like, days at
Yeah,
a
no,
like, 10
I was
days.
using, they were like, "Oh, use, track it." So I'm using one of those apps to, track
Yeah.
my bleeding. And you look at the like month calendar and it's literally just every single day, like month. Like I think I went 2 full months where I was bleeding
Wow.
every single day. So I'm still on like telehealth. I'm finally able to get in touch with my gynecologist. She sends me to do a transvaginal ultrasound and they do blood work. And at that point, that's when I'm anemic and they see the size of the fibroid. And so that bumps me up in the like list of for surgery because now,
Priority.
yeah, now I'm not elective anymore. So I'll give
Did
my
they
gynecologist.
do a transvaginal before in January when they were first kind of
Yeah.
negotiating? What
So
they
I
do?
had I had yeah, it was my second one. I had done my first one and then this was the second one. It's actually funny. I told Jess this after your guys' episode, I think it was 2 ago, about the like elective procedures and preventative procedures. I went online because at that point I had Kaiser and I pulled my whole medical record and I could actually see that they put the measurements of the fibroid in there. So I could see how much it grew from 2019 to 2020 from the 2 ultrasounds. Let's just say it was a lot. um, my doctor at that point, and this was something because of the pandemic, and she told me the procedure for her to get surgery spots was they opened them up weekly, only 1 week in advance, and either her or her nurse had to be there in person, almost like it was like a sale to like book
Oh my
the
God.
spots. Yeah. So she told me, she said, there's a chance I'm going to get it, but I'll only be able to give you a week's notice. And I said, okay. Because at this point, I was basically homebound. I was lucky. I was a teacher at the time. So we were teaching virtually so I could
Yeah.
work from home. But if it had been regular, normal life, like I couldn't leave the house. Like I would go on a walk for like an hour and couldn't make it back. Like that's how much I was
Wow.
bleeding. And lots of clotting, like just not fun. And also tons of physical symptoms. I had terrible cramping, just a lot of pain. So she calls me a week before my birthday, 2021, and says, I got a slot, but it's next week. So you have to go get a COVID test today. You've got to quarantine the rest of the week, and we're doing it. And this is where my wonderful sister comes in because at that point, too, right, you couldn't have anyone in the hospital with you. You
Right.
had to like go in by yourself. So, what I was most concerned about, they did it laparoscopically, but I was concerned that if something, and she told me this was a risk, if something, once they got in there, went wrong and they had to end up doing an open procedure, I would have to maybe spend the night at the hospital. And at that point, that's what I was worried about is then I would be stuck in a hospital with people maybe being treated for COVID and I would be there by myself. Like no one could come in. I couldn't.
Right.
Now, that did not happen. Everything went fine with my surgery, except I did take quite a long time to wake up, which I know put Jessica through a little bit of stress because they were like, yep, she's out. She's still not awake yet. Yeah, no, the surgery went fine. I healed up after, a week or two of low movement and everything, and it took care of the issue. But it was a long journey that got fast really, really quick.
Do you think you would have, had it not been COVID, right? And had it like you've been able to go to the doctor regularly and whatever. I know you had talked about like getting a second opinion or seeing another
Yeah.
doctor or whatever. Once it got so bad that it was just like you can't even like go out for a walk, would you have done a second opinion, or was it just like at that point like we're not
Yeah,
doing
no,
this anymore?
I would not. I think the time I would have gone to a second opinion was after I went like around my birthday, and then she said, "Let's get back together in April." I
Right.
probably in that in between time would have pursued that, but then obviously with the pandemic, it wasn't possible anymore.
Right.
What do you when you think about it's been a lot of conversation around fibroids. I myself have, as I said, I have several. What do you think? I mean, I have had friends who have had hysterectomies and been like, I wish I hadn't had that hysterectomy. I wish there were more all I mean, what are your thoughts on that in the alternatives and options that women have right now?
It's interesting because at the time, a little bit before I was going through this, a friend of mine who's a couple years older than me, she had fibroids and she was really working hard to get pregnant. Her and her husband really wanted kids. And so for her, she was doing all different types of treatments because for her, preserving her ability to be pregnant was so, so important. So it was interesting. We even at one point took the same drug, this drug Lupron, and she was taking it for an IVF journey, and I was taking it to try and stop, what was going on. So I know that I'm very lucky in that I had made the decision in my 20s that I did not ever want to carry a child. And so to me, having the hysterectomy was more just this is the best medical procedure for me. And I didn't have as much of the emotional burden that I think a lot of women would go through to have to make that decision to try and improve their quality of life versus, giving up a dream that they had always had.
Yeah, quality of life. It's interesting because as someone I've had been given the offer. You want to have hysterectomy? Do we want to do embolism and like kind of like they go in with the like hot water and stuff, or they've now been saying let's just hope that once you get because I'm in that stage of peri that I'm not really getting periods. So now
Yeah.
they're like, let's just wait and hope. But the wait and hope is made me nervous recently when we were hearing that the misdiagnosis of women and particularly of that black content creator made me think maybe is there something else I should be doing? And we'll be we're going to have several conversations coming up in the coming weeks with someone who focuses in her practice on fibroids, particularly with Black women. But I often think, is there something I should be doing more?
Yeah. I mean, as Jessica knows, I'm the type of person that I don't mull over decisions a lot, sometimes to my own detriment. But for me, once I made the decision to do it, there was really no questioning it because
Yeah,
I could not live my life anymore without having the procedure done. But I do think that we have so few options in between, right? It's
right.
you live and suffer with this, and we'll do some little tiny things that maybe will work for like a month or two, or we just remove the problem altogether. There's really
Right.
nothing in between.
When you think about aftercare, Sarah, like how much, again, you were in the middle of the pandemic, so like this is not shade on doctors, but how much like do you think you had to do your own research on like what what do the next 6 months for me look like without a uterus versus how much they were able to educate you?
Oh, I would say pretty much 90% on my own. And I'll give a shout out to the website Hister Sisters
Your
because
sister.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that's where I kind of got all the information, was women sharing their stories and experiences, like very detailed, week by week in your recovery, things to have ahead of time, people asking questions. I had at one point, I'd had some bleeding and pain, and I'm like, oh my god, is this are we going backwards? And I went on there, and people are like, no, this is common, this, that, this. So that was really my main resource.
Well, we appreciate you sharing your story. And I guess we always try to give some advice. Is there, if there was one thing that you in 2020, what would be that top advice you would tell women who, whether it's the IUD or the fibroids, what's some one advice you'd give people?
I would say that if something feels wrong, go get it checked out. Like,
Yeah.
even, we just dismiss things of like, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But go get it checked out, and don't be afraid to be honest with your medical care professionals. And because sometimes that's how I was the first couple times. I'm like, oh yeah, just there's some bleeding, it's a little heavier, but it's like, no, be honest. Tell them what is going on, and that would really probably be my number one tip.
Hey, it's Jessica. Thanks for listening to Girl Call Me. If you have something to add or a story to share, come on over to Instagram or Facebook and join the conversation. Also, make sure you follow and subscribe Girl Call Me. You don't want to miss when we release new episodes. Thanks for listening.